Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where we take a big spin through the news. This is the worst intro of the Spinning Back Clique show. I am so sorry, guys. I am not George Garcia, so obviously I'm not that smooth. But welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where we take a quick spin through the news of the MMA world and sometimes boxing. My name is Danny Segura, and I'll be hosting the show for today. All right, in today's agenda, we got UFC Des Moines Recap. We'll be talking about Deiveson Figueiredo and his loss to Corey Sandhagen. We'll also be talking about the co-main event of the card where we saw Bo Nickal suffer his first professional defeat. Later, we'll transition to some of the boxing headlines going on. We'll bring in journalist Alan Dawson to discuss some of the big topics in the boxing world. And then we'll transition to a preview of this weekend's UFC pay-per-view, UFC 315, which is being headlined by two title fights. The welterweight title fight featuring Belal Muhammad and Jack Della Maddalena, and the women's flyweight title fight between Valentina Shevchenko and Manon Fiorot. So before we get started, let me introduce you to the panel we have today. We got Nolan King from the mean streets of Boston, and I've been there. I've confirmed they're mean. How are you, Nolan?
Doing well, man. Celtics are killing it, so can't complain. Now let's swing over to George and see how the Lakers are doing.
Then we got the Garcia brothers also as two of the few Man United fans that are not suffering from chronic depression. Also, Europa League semifinalists. Look at them.
Yeah.
Gorgeous George and Goes. Guys, how are you?
Very, very good. And don't feel bad. You're not George Garcia, but neither is George Garcia. He's Jorge de la Cruz Garcia. Today it's Cinco de Mayo. So we're fired up here in Vegas.
Yeah, he's looking mean. And as you guys noticed with my horrible hosting skills, I am hosting today because Gorgeous George said he wanted to be a panelist. He's got some spicy takes, so watch out for this, man. The bar is high for him. All right, guys, before we get started, three things. Please thumbs up on this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you guys follow us on social media at MMA Junkie. That is a must for all MMA fans. If you're an MMA fan and you're not doing that, you're missing out. So make sure to check all those three boxes. All right. So let's get started with topic number one. We go to UFC Des Moines. It was this past weekend in Des Moines, Iowa. Big card, nice fight night. In the main event, we saw Corey Sandhagen defeat Deiveson Figueiredo in a bit of a weird finish, but nonetheless, an important victory for Corey Sandhagen. Let's start with Nolan. Nolan, how are you feeling about this fight? Was it what you were expecting? And can you give us your overall reaction on the result?
Yeah, it was. It's one of those weird ones, man, because it's unfortunate the way that it ended. I think we want to see a fight play out, right? We want to see how it actually goes. And but at the same time, I mean, Corey Sandhagen, his grappling led to that injury. So it's kind of in the category for me of like a Weidman Anderson, right? I remember at the time everybody debating like whether or not that was, Chris check kick should have been credited, with obviously with the win, but like how much credit would you give Weidman for that, right? So I kind of put this in the same category where it's like, I think Corey put Figueiredo in a vulnerable position and ultimately there was an injury. So shout out to him. It's not the fight people wanted to see, but we move on from here. I'm not sure what exactly it will do for Corey in terms of his title push. I kind of think maybe he still needs one more. But he's a challenging opponent, man. Like I've said in the past on the show, like there's nobody that in that division that I get more feedback from managers, from fighters that are at the top that they're kind of like, I'd prefer to not have to go through him just because he is a tricky matchup. He's somebody that's difficult to figure out a lot of times and kind of reminiscent of Dominic Cruz in some ways. And he just has a lot of, he presents a lot of challenges. So I think he's, he maintained that reputation on Saturday. Tough loss for Figueiredo. Obviously, hope everything's okay there with his knee. But for now, I mean, Corey's built a resume where I think he has that respect from the division and has set himself up to always pretty much be in the title conversation for the foreseeable future.
George, after the fight, we saw Corey Sandhagen ask for a UFC title shot and made a pretty good case. And I was surprised how good his case came off, considering, as Nolan said, it was an injury. And I don't know, the result wasn't exactly satisfying. Are you surprised with how much success, I guess, Corey Sandhagen's case hit? And do you agree? Do you feel like he should be next for the belt?
Well, yes and no. Okay, I appreciate him saying, putting it into existence, like they say, right? This call out is different from last week's, where Ian Gary said, I'd like to do it in 2 weeks. You need a week to recover and a week to lose weight. I didn't like it. I don't like that the UFC approved it, but he's in Montreal and he's ready to go. This one's about a month away. And so I think this one has more legs. And I like the fact that he's kind of trying to wiggle his way in there and run a little interference on Petr Yan, who I think is more deserving. He's got a win over Sandhagen. It was years ago, I get it, but he's won 2 in a row, whereas Sandhagen just shook off a win. So, but he put it into existence. So yeah, I don't mind him running a little interference, man. Now, should the UFC take it serious? Sure. If Petr Yan's just sitting in his hands doing nothing about it, then yeah. But if Petr Yan has spoken about it or already submitted his name, then I would say maybe Sandhagen's possibly trailing him. And it sucks because I do like fresh blood, right? When it comes to the title picture, Petr Yan is a former champ and all, but deserving is deserving.
Do you agree with those comments, Goes, or do you feel like Corey Sandhagen could maybe surpass Petr Yan and get himself a title shot here?
I agree with what he's saying. I do feel like at times, though, the UFC, you just never know what they could do. When you really start to break things down and you add streaks and positioning numbers next to your name, which supposedly count for something, I think it should be Yan. But the UFC's done some pretty crazy things. You never know. Sandhagen, that's his job, to put himself in that position to say those things. We say it time and time again on this show. The sport is a what have you done for me lately? And right now he's the guy with the spotlight on him. So I think that's the way he has to work things. But is it going to actually come to fruition? I'm not so sure. I like that Petr Yan's already being vocal about all this. That's what he has to do. He can't just let things play out the way the UFC and the way Corey Sandhagen want.
And Danny, can I add something to this? Every once in a while, the UFC needs to shake things out and make things straight. I understand it's like a bit, each weight class is like a ship right out in the ocean, and sometimes it strays off course. But come on, man. Remember a few years ago, Aljamain Sterling, he wasn't ready to go, but they shoved him in there. 3 months after his title fight, he said he wasn't ready. Sean O'Malley comes in, he wins. Then Sean O'Malley goes, I want Chito Vera, because he wanted to avenge a loss, right? But Vera wasn't the number 1 contender. All right, we had to sit through that. It was an ass whooping. Then speaking of ass whippings, that's what Dvalishvili laid out to Sean O'Malley. Yet Sean O'Malley's next. Come on now. At some point, let's get a proper number 1 contender rather than the biggest seller or just someone that wants to avenge a loss. And I think this is the right time to right the ship. Give Corey one more. That's all I'm asking for is one more. Get on a 2-fight win streak, and then boom, it's your time, dog.
Yeah. Nolan, do you agree with that? If you were Dana White or Hunter Campbell, what fight would you make next for the bantamweight title shot? Are you giving the shot to Corey Sandhagen, or are you going to Petr Yan?
I mean, it's tough, man. Like, I think timing's everything, but we actually are aligned pretty well, right? With the bantamweight title happening next. So in my brain, the first thing that would come up would be like, run it back, have them fight again. I know Corey's kind of indicated he's not necessarily interested in that he already beat Piotr. And for Piotr, I think he has, obviously would like to avenge that loss. So there's probably more benefit in it for him. If I had to choose between Sandhagen and Yan, I mean, it's tough, man. I guess it might depend. You know what? Honestly, I'd probably lean with Corey at this point. I know Yan has the back-to-back wins, but I think Corey has just proven to the only guys that can beat him are either champions or guys that, are right neck and neck with the champion in Umar. So I would lean with him. But I think Yan does have a case too. It's essentially, do you weigh quantity over quality? Tough to say.
Can I ask a question, guys? At this point, do you need that title fight to maybe play out first? Because depending on who's standing at the end of that, we all just assume it's going to be Merab. But if it were Sean O'Malley, that might change the way you look at it too.
And I think for me, I mean, that's
George is a problem with that, right? George,
I do a little bit because I'm glad Goes brought that up. I should have when I was talking about that little rundown. Dvalishvili really smoked Sandhagen less than a year ago. He was sitting on the stool in between rounds 4 and 5, and they go, "Hey, do something." He goes, "I'm trying." Like, have you gotten better enough to fight for the title in those 6 months? Was it a mental thing? I don't know, man. You were kind of steamrolled. So I got to give credit. Dvalishvili really is smashing fools. And so you got to show me something.
Yeah, I think you're confusing with Umar.
Compete against the champ. And just because you got surgery on your hip, I don't know that you're ready to go, O'Malley. And Sandhagen, just because you fought somebody who thought he was Husamar Paharis coming back again, doing the leg lock thing, I'm not so sure you've shown me that you're ready for the champ either. It's also a part of that.
Well, I mean, for me, I Sandhagen, you meant Umar, right? That's who beat Sandhagen, not
Oh,
Merab.
yeah, you're right.
But Merab, 50-40, whatever, Jan. So I think if he wins, like, is that a rematch that's very interesting to me? Not particularly. I mean, it's not like this was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It was very definitive. So I don't mind the wait and see approach. Like, I think Jan, and again, Sean O'Malley beat Jan too. So I think for me, the Sandhagen match is new, it's fresh, it's unique, and it's I don't know. I just think he's got one up on Jan just because of the situation of who likely would be champion after this Merab O'Malley fight, in my eyes.
All right, but let me tell you this, Nolan. How about when the announcers are there, right? Anik and DC and Joe Rogan, when it's not in Canada, he won't go to Canada apparently. But when they're standing there and when they can properly go, Belal Muhammad is on a 10-fight or 11-fight win streak. Like, there's something to that. You know, your titles should be like something that are coveted and praised, hard to get there or whatever. And when you sit there and go, Corey Sandhagen, he's on a 1-fight win streak. I mean, there's, you know, like, come on, build some momentum to get to that point. All I'm asking for is one more, and then he's on a streak.
I agree with George. I'm not a big fan of, unless you're a former champion, right? Unless you're the champion and you lost your belt, like Robert Whittaker, okay, go win one fight, come back, and then fight for the belt. But that's not Corey Sandhagen. Corey Sandhagen got beat pretty bad by Umar, who lost to Merab, and all of a sudden he has one victory over a 37-year-old, and he's vouching for a title shot. I do think he's very skilled. I do think he's worthy of fighting for the belt in terms of skills, but I think he needs to build up that resume. I think Peter Yan is the clear answer right now. I think the only difference there is if Sean O'Malley were to beat Merab. I don't know. Are they going to do a trilogy? If they don't, I do think the biggest fight would be Sean O'Malley versus Corey Sandhagen. So that could be interesting to me, and I would understand why business-wise and entertainment-wise, they would go that route. But yeah, it is a tricky one. I feel like depending on the result that we see at UFC 316, Peter Yan and Corey Sandhagen could be in totally different positions.
Yeah, this conversation is making me realize, like, how much credit we give Merab too, right? Like, I think the part of the reason that we're debating this is almost which one would we want to see more and which one would we want to see less. But I think we're kind of in agreement of the outcomes of both of these, that, you know, Sandhagen struggled getting taken down by Umar. What's Merab going to do? Probably the same thing. And then conversely, we saw what Merab did to Petr Yan. So the division's in a weird place because I think we all love it. We all look at this, you know, the top 10, top 15, and we're like, man, these guys are all really good, some fun fights, but it doesn't necessarily have that divisional momentum with contenders that are all, you know, oh, this guy should get it, or that guy should get it. It's kind of like, we've seen a lot of these fights. These guys are the ones that are really good, and which one do we want to run back? So bantamweight's in a weird place where I almost feel like if the trilogy were to happen with Merab and Sean, it would actually maybe free things up a bit and allow for guys to have more momentum. But as of now, we're pretty much aligned with this June title fight, and there not being a need for that sort of title eliminator match.
Real quick, let's go around the panel. Gun to your head, Corey Sandhagen wins a UFC title before it's all said and done. Nolan?
No.
Goes.
I'm going to say no.
George.
Wow. Before it's all said and done, I think he's 33. But the grapplers, there's two good ones there that seem to give him trouble. He only needs to get past one. Somehow, I think, you know, he'll avoid. So I'm going to go yes, because I'm just a glass full type guy. But yeah, man, we do have to give credit to Merab. He's been smashing people. Everyone needs to get to a point where they can, you know, prove that they can level things up. And they should all beware if Patchy Mix sends one more text and the PFL releases him and he comes over, who knows? He might be the guy. But at this point, the guy that got slapped by Merab in the stands, he's probably giving Merab the best fight. And he took a big old slap. Everyone else is getting steamrolled.
Yeah,
that's the thing. It's a credit to the division, because if we did this for other guys in the division, we'd probably be saying no as well. I mean, just the top is pretty heavy, and it's nothing really against Corey. It's, you know, age, it's wear and tear, and it's who's at the top.
It's nothing against the names. It's nothing. All you people in the chat, if anyone's tripping, don't trip, all right? Because all you do is just move the names and move the faces. It's exactly the same thing we would do. We call it like it is.
Yeah, 100%. Goes real quick, Justin Davison Figueiredo. Is he done as a title contender? 37 years of age. That injury, we don't know the extent of it, but just the fact that he, like, you know, tapped out from it, stopped fighting from it, I would suggest, or I would assume it's pretty serious. Are we done watching the title days or title contention days for Figueiredo here?
It depends. That could be a trick question because look, the fight didn't go his way, but I think he's shown us that he deserves to be in the division. He's got some decent wins there. But here's why I say it could be a trick question, because if he's got it in him, if he's aligned with the right people that can get him back down in weight, and he went back to 125, if the stars align correctly, I could see him fighting for a title there, but not at 135. I think those days are probably gone.
Nolan, we like Figueiredo at 25 again?
I don't know. It's a weird one, man. You know, I think at 37, where you've had weight problems before, it seems like a tall task to me. But at this point in time, if it wasn't him who had the history and you take his age out of it, I wouldn't mind a divisional shakeup or revisiting of 125. I really feel like right now, we'll have to see what this injury is too, but like, I feel like he's kind of, you know, the wind is out of his sails a bit. He needs a recharge. And so which way would get him to the title quicker? Going back down to flyweight, he gets a big win over a top contender. Is he in that conversation for, you know, a fresh matchup for whoever holding the belt at that time, for Pantoja or somebody else? Maybe. Whereas I think here it's kind of a big uphill climb. I mean, how many wins in a row is he going to have to get to try to get even to fight for the title again at 135, given the back-to-back losses? So it really comes down to his health, I think, at this point, and what makes sense. You know, if you're depleting your body going to 125, if you're putting yourself in a terrible position to even try to win, that's not smart. But I could see him trying to do it to give him that recharge that he needs, the shortest route to the title.
Yeah, I guess we'll see what happens, but definitely a tough situation. Just being anywhere south of 155 and being 37 years of age is just not a good place to be, especially considering how stacked 135 is. And 125, we saw some of those earlier pictures, you know, that he posted starting the camp, and he looked pretty far from 25 to me. So we'll see, but definitely a tough loss, very tough loss for Deiveson Figueiredo. All right, guys, let's transition into the co-main event. There was a big result there. I don't know how many of us called it. I think George did. So let's start with him. Bo Nickal suffered his first professional defeat. A lot of people just thought it was going to come down to how Bo Nickal was going to win. Was it going to be a knockout? Was it going to be a decision? But I feel like a lot of people, including myself, I'll admit, were not really giving much of a chance to De Ridder. George, is this what you expected? And were you surprised to see how many people went against De Ridder in this situation, considering that you had him winning?
Well, look, what we always say is you want to start a fighter off, right, in a video game. First thing you do is give him some amazing wrestling. And so Bo Nickal's got that. He's full of confidence. He's with a great team. He ticks a lot of boxes, but experience counts for a lot going into that fight. RDR had 3 times the experience. He's been a title. He's won titles in 2 different weight classes over at one championship. So he's just not some scrub that's coming over, guys. This is the same guy that kicked Kevin Holland's ass and Gerald Mearshart. Like he's got credentials. So I thought, that at some point, the way the fight might shape out, he could be a live dog here. I was expecting a submission either at the end of round 2 or maybe in round 3, because when I've seen Bo Nickal fight, he's getting better, of course, but I'm also seeing lulls of the fight where he's struggling, or you can just tell he's an inexperienced fighter yet, and he hasn't graduated to all the hype that's been heaped upon him. So that's why I went with RDR. Plus, I love underdogs. If you're gonna play a parlay, the underdog is what gives you the big payday. So you got to take a chance from time to time. So, dude, I had round 2 finished, except I had it by submission, and it was a TKO. It was a nice knee to the body from that unorthodox Dutchman.
Yeah. Nolan, how much do you think his stock dropped? Because we saw some of the reaction online, and it was quite harsh. And Bo Nickal has been heavily criticized and has been put under a microscope because of how much privilege the UFC has given him. And then rightfully so. He entered the UFC as a star, right? So how much do you think does this loss hurt his career?
Well, it'll be tough. It will really come down to what he's going to do with it mentally for me. You know, we've seen him come into this sport and do things. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I wasn't really high on him. Like some of the stuff that we see with prospects, what we saw with him, we don't really see with prospects. I mean, his boxing to start was way further along than I think a lot of the wrestlers that transition and really struggle with that. Even coming in the UFC, I mean, he had a couple, I don't want to call them layup fights, but very beginner level fights. And then, you know, the Paul Craig matchup was tricky. I know people didn't like that performance, and I think that's where they kind of maybe started to turn on him a little bit. That paired with some of his comments about, you know, he could be a huge favorite against Hamzat if they fought and blah, blah, blah. So I get it. I mean, if you come out and you say all these, make these huge claims and then you can't back it up, I think you're open to criticism. But at the same time, to totally write him off, the competitor that he is, I don't think that's necessarily correct either. I mean, you talk about the privilege the UFC gave him. RDR is a very tough matchup for anybody in whatever this was, his 5th UFC fight or whatever. So the experience differential there was insane. I think they accelerated him a little bit too quick, but like I've said before, I think suffering losses is kind of almost key for fighters that are on the come up. And he's had a very unusual rise to where he is. And so what is he going to do with that? What can he take away from this? Is he gonna, is it gonna break his system that things didn't compute out right off the bat the way that he expected, that it wasn't a straight line to the top? Ultimately, he's the only one that can figure that out. Is he going to have that fire lit under him to get better? Then we could be dealing with the guy that's still improving and takes away a lot from this. So I'm not ready to write him off. I think the criticism's somewhat fair because of what he said, but also we got to pump the brakes on how quickly he got to this point to fight a guy that was a major promotional champion with dozens of fights, and realize who he was going against. Let's give RDR some credit as well.
Did you have to readjust your perception on Bo Nickal after this result, or is it still the same? And if you were the UFC, what do you think is the proper next step for him?
Well, look, I picked RDR as well. I feel like we're in a different era right now of our sport, where back in the day, you'd see a lot of these prospects kind of cutting their teeth in Cage Warriors, King of the Cage, LFA. They would build themselves up so that when they get to the UFC, they would be prepared. Now, I think the UFC is trying to beat everybody to these prospects, and they're bringing them in through Dana White's Contender Series, which is nice. But when they bring them into the UFC, these guys are learning on the job, and the UFC is no place to learn on the job. That's the problem I think that's happening right now. So Bo needs to go back to the gym. He needs to figure out, because like Nolan said, RDR is kind of a tricky fighter. He didn't really have any answers for what he was doing. He's got to figure that out first. And then I think he has to go back to the drawing board. But I don't think we can write him off completely. If we use that same model, Dana White's Contender Series, Jamal Hill eventually hit a roadblock, built himself back up, won a title. Sean O'Malley did the same thing. I don't see why Bo Nickal can't maybe take a few steps back, re-engage, and figure this thing out.
Yeah. And George, what do we do with RDR now? Do you give him the Sean Strickland fight that he asked for, or do you feel like there's a better option for him next?
Well, I know Izzy's campaigning for the Sean Strickland fight, and that one might be too hard to pass up, because the UFC's just got to be happy that A, he's not retiring, and B, these two guys will get into it. And that's a proper headliner, right, for a fight night or something like that, or like a big one, the ones on ABC or ESPN, not necessarily a pay-per-view. But if somehow that fight doesn't happen, then I love the call out. He said, hey, I just took on your best American wrestler. Now give me your best American striker. So I just love that he's trying to take control of his career. Let's see if Strickland bites, or if not him, then maybe another crafty veteran along the way that is ranked ahead of you, like a Jared Cannonier, or I don't know if Kyle Barrio might be too much, but at the pace RDR is going, you never know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's not a bad suggestion. We'll see what's next for Kyle. Obviously, he's been linked to some fights. Guys, let's talk about Jeremy Stephens real quick. I absolutely loved this fight that we saw. It was tremendous. I think the UFC bringing him back and having him fight in Iowa in front of his people in Des Moines, I thought it was great. It was amazing, and the UFC should do more of that. And that was set on paper, but now that we saw the proof, I still stand by that. I thought it was a home run having him there. Yes, he lost, but the crowd was extremely into it. So what'd you guys think real quick? We'll go around the panel. What'd you think of Jeremy Stephens' comeback? And should the UFC hang on to him, or do you think this is better off as a one-fight deal and, thank you and goodbye? Nolan.
I mean, I don't love the old guys fighting thing. I think the UFC for the most part does a good job of not letting, with some exceptions, guys have their careers dragged out. I think Stephens, like we said a couple weeks ago, he's an exception. I thought that going in, and I thought that coming out. And great matchmaking with Mason Jones, kind of a cool story there as well. Put him over a little bit with the win. But I would give him another shot. I mean, who's not going to want to tune in? I think he's a guy you can kind of match up against anyone. You can give him somebody in the top 15. You can give him, a rising, obviously they're not going to give him a ranked fighter, but give him a rising prospect like we saw on Saturday. Hell yeah, bring him back. His chin held up. He's still Jeremy Stephens. He still can compete, and he's got name value.
Goes agree or disagree?
A little bit of both. I think, like Nolan said, he does still have value. He's the type of guy that you want to see on a card when you're purchasing tickets for an event. But at the same time, is it the best scenario for Jeremy Stevens? Because I kind of enjoy him at BKFC. He seems like more of a star, more of the spotlights on him there. He doesn't, at his age, the wear and tear that comes from training for an MMA fight, it's a lot less for a BKFC fight. Maybe he can extend that career, make more money. I don't know. So really, I think it comes down to Jeremy Stevens.
George, you're an OG. Did you enjoy
Yes, I
watching the
did.
OG?
He entertained me. Him and Alas entertained me than more than some of these winners. He went out there and knew how to throw down, and he showed that he hasn't missed a beat since leaving the UFC a few years ago. He worked himself out of some really tough positions to try and get back there and sling them dogs, and he was hurting Mason Jones. But Mason Jones is good as well. So what I would do, because I know that's what everyone's wondering, is sign him to a contract. Give him a little bit. He delivered, so give him a little bit of reassurance there. I like either is it Manuel Torres or Zellhuber in Guadalajara. Stevens has embraced the Mexican side of him. He's got a Mexican wife. He lives in San Diego. He loves his tacos. Send him down to Guadalajara and fight one of them two Mexicans. Like Nolan said, hey, someone who's rising, and both guys are like 4-0 or 4-1. I think it's a perfect matchup, and the Mexican fans are going to love Stevens.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea at all. All right, guys, time's up here for UFC Des Moines, but let's transition into some boxing because there is some MMA into it, and we'll get into it in just a few minutes. So let's bring in boxing reporter Alan Dawson, who has been on the program before, so it might be a familiar face to a lot of people. Alan, how are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me on the show, guys. Good to see you all again.
Alan, let's start off here. Huge weekend, right, for boxing, but a weird one, all right? We got some big boxing news, some big fights. The fights themselves, some were good, some weren't so good. Can you describe what this weekend was for boxing, if you can put it into words?
It should have been a tentpole weekend because on the Friday, you had a New York show where we were told there were going to be hundreds of thousands of fans shutting down Times Square. And the fights were on paper. They looked to be brilliant. And then on Saturday, we had a Riyadh season event with Canelo Alvarez, one of the pound-for-pound staples of the last decade, making his debut with Riyadh season, the first of 4 fights for him. And then on Sunday, we had Naoya Inoue coming back to Vegas for the first time in 4 years. So when you put all these big names together, it should have been this landmark moment. But the first 2 nights just really failed to deliver. Like I mentioned, the New York one, they overpromised and they underdelivered. There was a fencing that was put up, so a lot of people couldn't actually see, and they had to watch on TV. So it really turned out to just be, like this circle jerk for 200 celebrities and VIPs inside that fencing. And the fights again, Devin Haney and Jose Ramirez, they almost set a record for like inactivity in the ring. Saul Canelo Alvarez broke that record the next night. These are punch data and statistics that go back 40 years by CompuBox, showing how inactive these fighters were. But then on Sunday, Naoya Inoue comes in, Rafael Espinoza comes in, and they both steal the show. They steal the weekend. And, thankfully, they saved boxing from what could have been, a self-inflicted black eye.
Alan, do you think that that's sort of just, it happens, some fights are just not going to play out as barn burners, or do you think there's something to it? And I saw Tim Bradley say something online, said something like, these boxers are too pampered now. There's too much money going around. And he didn't say the name specifically, I believe, but kind of pointed at Turki Al-Sheikh as like, hey, you're paying these guys too much, and they're just out there collecting checks and kind of forgetting about being boxers, being fighters.
I think that's a narrative that someone like Dana White would love to hear, because he'd probably like to lower that fighter pay for when he comes into the sport later in the year. I think it's more a case of Turki Al-Sheikh, to his credit, he's making some big events, and some of these have been, really amazing, like the Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev trilogy, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk fight series. But when you throw some of these big names together, sometimes they don't deliver. There is an art to matchmaking. And I think we saw that this weekend. Top Rank, they've been in the business for, 40, 50 years, and they've got some of the best matchmakers in the business. I was there from the opening fight at the T-Mobile Arena all the way through the show. There were 8 fights on the card. So many of them were well matched. So many of them delivered. Emiliano Vargas got an awesome knockout There was a Japanese fighter lower on the card called Nakano. He looked like awesome. Certainly one to watch going forward. Rafael Espinoza is the sort of guy that, he looks gangly. He's a 6'1" featherweight, but he just bludgeons opponents, and then he stands over their bodies and he just sings like these beautiful Mexican melodies to everyone in the crowd. And then it set up the stage for Naoya Inoue to, get dropped, rise from the canvas, and close the show. I think there's an art to matchmaking. I think Top Rank got it spot on, and I think if Riyadh season is going to learn anything from this weekend, is maybe they should be looking at what Top Rank is doing about the fights that they're making, rather than throwing big names together. There's a process to putting on, styles make fights.
Last question for me, and then I'll turn it over to the guys that they also have some questions for you, Alan. Huge news, obviously, with Canelo and Bud Crawford getting booked. That fight's just huge. Can you talk about how big is it in the context of the history of boxing? And also, are you surprised that it got made? Because not long ago, Canelo had certain comments that didn't seem very promising in the making of this fight.
Yeah, I'm not too surprised that it did get made, because I've been expecting Dana White and Terence Crawford to partner up for years. Going back to when Crawford, he's been training at the Performance Institute for a while, and he even did a press conference at the Apex, where we have the UFC, press events. We've all been in that room, and Crawford was in there, so it's kind of like a boxing takeover when he was there. We've seen him at Apex shows. When Dana White was making his play, or when it was first becoming apparent that this time it was going to be different and he was going to be coming into boxing, I remember asking him, if Crawford was going to be a part of that. Dana White, he plays cards, but he hasn't got a good poker face sometimes. He'll say, like, anything is possible, but you can tell he's smiling and that there is something there. So, it did seem like him and Crawford were going to do something. And as soon as Canelo joined Riyadh season, that suddenly both fighters are under the same umbrella. And when you can make the amount of money that this event is going to generate, it is going to be a big event. There's a difference between big and best. The best fights would have been David Benavidez and Canelo and Jaron Ennis for Crawford. But in terms of magnitude, it's really hard to beat this. It's going to be at the Allegiant Stadium. It'll be the first ever combat sports show at the Raiders Stadium. And then when you put Dana White, when you have his involvement as well, it's always going to capture the boxing interest. Now you're going to bring in the MMA interest as well. You guys are going to be writing about it. We're going to have, MMA fans looking at this boxing event. It's going to be the whole of combat sports looking at this show. It's going to transcend the sport. And we're going to see, it's going to probably break one of the, pay-per-view milestones that we probably haven't seen broken for quite a while. I think it's going to be a huge show.
And I got one for you, Alan, kind of going off that. TKO boxing in general, I mean, what do you think we can expect at this point in time, right? Because I feel like we know a little bit, but we also still don't even know kind of the basics of like what the name is even going to be. I know Dana keeps saying we're not going to call it TKO boxing, we're going to call it something else. So for them to kind of come out and say, oh, the first event we're going to do under whatever we're going to call this, TKO boxing, to be Canelo and Terence Crawford, massive, fight that's going to draw a lot of interest. Is this is just some sort of like kind of a launch, do you think? Do you expect them to dive into these massive events, or will they take on more of a UFC model where maybe they're into building guys from the ground up? And I guess kind of what do you think us on the MMA side should expect from TKO boxing?
When you look at the TKO group, you've got the market leader in MMA in the UFC. You've got the biggest name in pro wrestling and WWE. There was always a boxing-shaped hole there to be filled. And it would just look weird if it wasn't the market leader in boxing. So even though, Dana White and TKO, their initial splash was going to be 2026 with the creation of this league that was going to feature guys that weren't names, that were going to be built up to be names. But that isn't how the other businesses in TKO operate. They want to be the biggest and the best. So when we see these types of signature events that, could potentially land on Netflix, considering Jake Paul and Mike Tyson were on that. We've got the upcoming women's only show in New York with Amanda Serrano, Katie Taylor, Alicia Baumgartner, and a few other high quality women. These are the sorts of shows that could be the sort of PLE, premium live events that, we could see the pay-per-view kind of model morph into. I think we could see more and more of this kind of event. I think the day-to-day stuff will be the league, and then maybe 4, 5, 6 events a year could be these the biggest events of the year for boxing, really.
I kind of want to bring up something that I know a lot of boxing people don't like to talk about, but we're stuck talking about it all the time. It's Jake Paul. Listen, I grew up in the Mike Tyson era. I did not like what I saw on Netflix, but I know that a lot of people tuned in, and he's back again, and he's supposedly fighting a real boxer. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., I mean, he's never really represented boxing the way his father was. I know that's a very high bar, but he hasn't even come close to that. Why is Jake Paul fighting him? Is he out of options? Where did we jump the shark with the Tyson fight? Where are we at with this?
Yeah, I'm with you. I wasn't like, for one, I think Jake Paul is a face of boxing. He's one of the most visible fighters. That does rub people in boxing up the wrong way, but we can't ignore the eyeballs that he brings to the sport. I think he's got quite a unique fan base, that has been, he's, for the first part of his career, he was kind of trolling MMA media, MMA fans, and I still think there's kind of residual interest from those early days. The Mike Tyson fight was a farce. It probably should have been billed as an exhibition. It just didn't look good. It was saved really by the women's fight just before Katie Taylor, and also Mario Barrios was in a banger with Abel Ramos. So the card was okay, but it was just a bit of a stinker of a main event. The reason I think we're getting Julio Cesar Chavez is because, one, he has got a name value. He's not seen as like a significant person just in boxing. He has won a title, but it was a long time ago. He did fight Saul Canelo Alvarez. He's got decent names on his record, but they were a long time ago, and he's not the same fighter he was then now. I think if he wins, he's probably going to get ranked, probably by the WBC, and I think this is why he's picked Julio Cesar Chavez. And if we look at the actual card, I think we're seeing the future play as well. There's a partnership with Golden Boy Promotions here. The main event is Zurdo Ramirez and Dorticus. So if Jake Paul wins and Zurdo Ramirez wins, we're probably going to see that fight. And guess what? That's for a legitimate world championship.
Alan, I want to bring it back to Vegas. You said this could be a big show. I know it can't beat Klitschko and Joshua, because I think that was 90,000 in the UK about 5-7 years ago. But what are the gate records? I know that the pay-per-view record is Pacquiao and Floyd, and then in second place was Floyd and Conor. So can this fight, Canelo and Crawford, come close on the pay-per-view side, and then as far as the gate side as well? Does it have a chance?
In terms of most, I just had to quickly Google it. I think the record for the most amount of spectators was Julio Cesar Chavez and Greg Hagan.
Oh, Hagan, in Mexico City.
132,000, absurd amount of people. In terms of ticket sales, I actually think they probably would have gotten a better gate, a higher gate if they went to the T-Mobile. I know Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, when they were working out the ins and outs of that fight, Allegiant Stadium was for sure in play. But when I spoke to insiders, I was told they kind of always consider, bigger venues, but they just come back to the T-Mobile Arena or MGM Grand because it sounds like it shouldn't work. But when you have lower amount of tickets available, they go for higher prices, and the overall gate is higher. So when you're, potentially trying to sell 50, 60,000 tickets, you might not get as much revenue from there. I'm not sure it will set a gate record. $20 million would be a fantastic, would be a considerable win, especially as this is a Riyadh season card, and typically they don't really go for the gate. So this could be certainly a cash spinning exercise for them. In terms of pay-per-view, could it do one better than Errol Spence and Terence Crawford? I think that from memory, it got between 500,000 and 600,000 pay-per-views sold in the US. The Davis and Garcia fight that I mentioned, I think that got about 1.2 million. That was a real unicorn, though. I think we could get somewhere in that range between 500,000 and a million. It's so hard to get a million though these days just because of piracy. If they could get 500,000, I even think that's a win. Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder are typically reaching about 850,000 households in the US. These are the figures I think they should be, going for, considering you have got Canelo and you have got Crawford. And I have to say, I've been thinking Canelo has been there for the taking for a few years. I did think it was only going to be David Benavidez that was going to be able to be the person to beat him. But I think that net is widening now. I think there's going to be other fighters that will be looking at Canelo thinking this guy isn't the same as he once was. He hasn't had a knockout since 2021, which was Caleb Plant. He's throwing a hell of a lot less punches. So someone like Crawford, I think he could be competitive here. I think it could be, I don't think this is, going to be one-sided in Canelo. I think this could be, a pretty interesting fight between, somebody who has, Crawford, who is still looking for another signature win. He massacred Errol Spence Jr. Whether he goes up, he's fought a lot of his career at 147. He had one fight at 154. Canelo is a mainstay at 168, and he's fought as high as 175. The weight difference is vast, but this is the reason we talk about pound for pound. If Crawford can go up and beat Canelo, it'll be one of the biggest wins in modern boxing history.
Alan, here on Spinning Back Clique, we don't sit on the fence. Give us your prediction, man. Give us your early pick. Obviously, you can change your mind from here to the fight, but who are you leaning? Who are you picking for that fight?
This might be recency bias, but after the other night with how poor I thought Canelo looked, I think I might go Crawford.
Yeah. It seems the momentum's going that way, right? But you can't ignore the weight as well. So, very interesting fight we'll see on September 12th. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. Before you leave, can you let the listeners and viewers at Spinning Back Clique where they can find some of your work?
On X, I'm Alan Dawson Sport. I'm a columnist at Uncrowned with Yahoo Sports. I write my day-to-day stuff at Give Me Sport, and I'm doing TV, mainly bare knuckle stuff for Swerve Combat. I'd love to see you guys on going forward, and you can follow all my stuff there. Appreciate you guys on the platform. Always great seeing you guys, and hopefully see you at International Fight Week.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Alan. All right, nice little boxing direction here. We went with that segment. Boxing's hot right now, man. I gotta say, I love MMA. That is my sport. I obviously prefer it far more than boxing, but they're doing big things. MMA right now, it's a little bit down, right? I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, and Danny, look, listen, I think we had great intentions because some big names fought. Ryan Garcia fought. We didn't get to him. Teofimo Lopez fought. In addition to Canelo and Inoue, these are all very either popular fighters that have competed for titles, pay-per-view draws. And of course TKO involvement. That's does huge. Bring Dana White over, and there's starting to be some crossover between some MMA athletes and the Jake Pauls and some others. So we're going to cover it here, on Spinning Back Clique when it's a big weekend like it was.
Yeah, 100%, especially with the TKO boxing stuff. I forgot who brought it up, but pre-going live, somebody was talking about how that boxing fight between Canelo and Crawford is going to be September 12th, which is a Friday. And then we got Noche UFC, which is an important UFC event. It'll be a UFC pay-per-view. It'll be 320, if I'm not mistaken. That is on a Saturday, September 13th. And they're different nights, but the fight weeks are overlapping. So Dana White promoting this event, where is he going to be? Is he going to be at the UFC pay-per-view, or is he going to be at this historic Canelo versus Crawford fight? So very interesting stuff.
Well,
and we'll see how
he's got the private jet, so he can make it happen. But what about the fans? Because he's pulling in fans from Mexico.
The fight week, if you got an open workout on Wednesday,
what's that?
Or the arrivals or whatever, or a press conference, how are you going to show up at Guadalajara,
Exactly.
I get it for fight night.
Yeah, the fans, man, they got, if they want to cover both, that's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, let's get back to MMA because I know some guys on the chat here, being MMA junkies, they're fiending for this stuff. So let's give a preview for UFC 315, the upcoming pay-per-view that we'll see on Saturday. 2 title fights headlining it. In the main event, we'll see the welterweight title being up for grabs. Champion Belal Muhammad will be defending against Jack Della Maddalena. And in the co-main event, MMA great Valentina Shevchenko will be defending her women's flyweight title against Manon Fiorot. So let's start with the main event here. Actually, no, F that. Let's start with the overall excitement level for this card. I mentioned how MMA has maybe been a little bit down this year, but 315, maybe it goes along those trends that I was mentioning. I don't know. You guys tell me. Maybe you guys are more excited than me. But let's start with Nolan. 1 through 10. What is your excitement level for 315?
On a pay-per-view scale, I'd say like a 4.5, like a little less than average.
Wow.
I guess for me, I feel like we talk about, as George gasps in the background, he's going hard on me because of the flag issue behind me. But
it's 1 through 10, not 1 through 5.
Did you say 1 through 10?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 4.5.
You're giving this pay-per-view?
Yeah, for a pay-per-view. I mean, again, what are we going on a regular scale?
I was
Maybe
say like a 6
elevated.
myself, and I thought I was being a Debbie Downer, but damn,
no, for me, I think it's a fight. The main event, I feel, is a fight that happened because of timing to a certain degree. Again, I feel like a broken record saying this, but it is such an important factor now. The UFC has a quota they have to keep up with. And if, if a champion's ready and 1 through whatever is not, contenders are not ready, then they have to find somebody else. And JDM's right there. I mean, I think it's not like it's a crazy reach or anything, but I do think that in most timelines, he would have to fight one more time before he got that shot. So we have a title fight with, a champion who stylistically, I think, is not the most exciting at times against a contender who is pretty fun, but he to me, he should have had one more before he took this. So with all that aside, there's that. There's the co-main event, which I think is the right fight, unless you were going to make the super fight with Valentina and Zhang Weili. This was the right fight. And then you have some good supporting acts. I mean, we got Jose Aldo on there. We got Alexa Grasso. Kind of a bummer that the Joel Alvarez and Benoit Saint-Denis fight has fallen through. I know BSD's kind of in a weird, we don't really know what's happening with him category right now. But for me, I don't know. I think it's kind of an average-ish title fight lineup, and then also just the supporting depth is not necessarily there. There's some good matchups. There's some fun fights. There's also, I think there's only 11 fights right now. So I don't know. I kind of put it at average or a little bit below. So that's where I went for that. If we're throwing in fight nights and evereverything else, maybe it gets a little higher on the scale, more of a 6, but on pay-per-view level,
by pay-per-view standards.
Yeah, I'd say 4.5, 5 for me.
4.5. Okay. Well, James Patterson's giving here a 2.3 in the comments.
I'm not that bad.
Sheesh.
How do you even get to the 0.3 part?
Talk to me, man. Is it that bad?
No, I think Simon Cowell's tripping here. He's being a little harsh. It's got 2 title fights, and we love seeing the highest ranked fighters in a weight class as possible fight. Are they the most popular or intriguing or charismatic? No, but Belal Muhammad's had an incredible streak leading into the title fight. He's only at his first title defense, so we're not ready to coronate him yet as a future welterweight great yet. But still, he's been on an impressive run, and I like that he smashed Edwards. He might be more of a decisionator, but he does smash, and so he's got my respect. And Jack Della Maddalena is not who we wanted. We wanted Shafkat, but it didn't work out that way. But still, he's been on a roll. I'll take it. And then Valentina and Fiorot. How can you not respect Valentina? Usually fighters at that age, after they've had their run, that's it, right? But props to her. Props to Volkanovski. They've come back. They've reclaimed their titles, and now they got proper opponents ahead of them. So we'll see what happens with the French woman, Manon Fiorot, who's had to wait a whole year until she can fight this fight. How can you not get excited about the great Jose Aldo competing? I wouldn't have matched them up against Ayman Zahabi, but it's still Jose Aldo. What sucks, though, and I feel Nolan here, is losing Joel Alvarez against Benoit Saint-Denis. That would have been a nice way to kickstart the night. The lightweights always deliver. I agree with Dan Tom there every time he says that. Start with lightweights. We'll see if they can fill that void. But yeah, I was more around the 6.5 to 7.5 range. When I heard a 4, I was like, whoa, man, that's
7.5. Now you're tripping. Please, chat hashtag GGB tripping. 7.5. You're crazy. Let's see if Goes is here a little bit more. What else
could you possibly do? Let's just say
it's a 6 at best. I'm not with Nolan, and I'm not with you. Let's see if
well, you're closer to me than Nolan. The 6 is right.
Goes matches my energy here.
All right, how about you, Goes?
I'm not with any of you guys. I'm at a 5.
Okay.
Look, but there's the number you give it going into the week.
The water's nice over here in the 4.5.
There's the number you give it going into the week, and then there's a number when you wake up on fight day. It's usually a little bit higher. By fight day, I might be at 6, but Danny's right. You have to judge this all together. Pay-per-view standards, what we've seen before, this does not add up to that. Now, how many times are we complaining about the right people getting the right matchups in this case, we were dealt that hand, and they did the best they could. But the Valentina fight, that's the fight that should have happened. So we're just gonna get that, man. Could it deliver? Yeah, but is it on the standards of the other? It's just not as sexy.
Yeah. Nolan, where do you think Belal Muhammad is at? As obviously he's carrying this pay-per-view. He's the main event. He's the champion. Where do you think his standing is in MMA? Because I got to tell you, I absolutely love Belal Muhammad. I don't think his fights are boring at all. Maybe a few years ago, but I feel like the corner has been turned there. And promotion-wise, he's a good trash talker. I'm not saying he's Conor McGregor, but damn, I feel like, I don't know. He's really come around. I really do think he is an underappreciated asset, but I don't know. Maybe we define
100. No, 1000%. I think people have such an issue, particularly in the MMA world, of separating whether they not like somebody or not, and whether they're good or not. And he's an excellent fighter. I think he's done a good job promoting himself. I do appreciate his ability to take on this kind of unwarranted hatred at times. Like, he leans into it, but it's not like full WWE like Henry Cejudo. You know, it's more of him being him. So nothing but respect for him. And I do think that he has become, more exciting over the years. I don't think he's necessarily somebody I'm like, oh, Alex Pereira stepping in there or anything like that. But I think his reputation is a bit unfair when it comes to the public eye, right? But he's an excellent fighter, man. I mean, he's great. I think for me with this one, again, it's just, if it was Shavkat across the cage from him, it would feeling a little bit different about the way that this pay-per-view is. And again, nothing to do with Jack. Jack's super exciting. He's killed it. I mean, great run to start your career in the UFC. Just unbelievable stuff there. But again, it's just when you have particularly those contenders that are a little bit closer, but they aren't the ones being chosen because of whatever sort of circumstance, injury, timing, whatever. I think it does put a little bit of a damper on the feels of okay, what's the big fight? What am I tuning in for tonight? So shout out to Belal, though. He's great. He's awesome. Always been him, and I hope he continues to stick it to the haters.
George, what do you think is the best result here for the business, for the UFC? Belal Muhammad hasn't really captured the imagination, hasn't really, enchanted the fan base all that much. But like, as I said, and Nolan said, he's coming around, and I do feel like fans are starting a little bit to warm up to him. Or do you feel like maybe with Jack, being from Australia, which that's an important market, and I don't know, he's chill, but there's just something cool about that guy. Plus, his fighting style is badass. What do you think is the best result here for the promotion?
Good question, man. Like, they got themselves the Volk back, right? It's always nice when Oceania has a champ. They lost Izzy and Volk for a while, but now Volk is back. But I don't know. I think let's rally behind Belal Muhammad, who again has an impressive win streak. He doesn't have the finishes, I get it, but he did smash the incumbent. And that's always a good start. Now, this is the big fight. If he can do something similar to Jack Della Maddalena, either knock him out, submit him, or smash him, then maybe we got something going. Let's not forget, Belal Muhammad, a lot of his best fights are on social media. So he's pretty good behind the mic, and he lets people have it on social media. So let's give him some time, right? But yes, he can probably accept the fact he hasn't been a finisher. It's been slow in him gaining traction.
Yeah. Goes. All right, let's start getting into predictions. Who do you got?
Look, I think JDM has a way better chance than people are giving him. I think Belal Muhammad's a great fighter, though, and what he's been able to accomplish so far, it's kind of hard to pick against him at this point. So I kind of believe in Belal. I think he's got something right now. I think even going back to the previous question, like, I think this is a guy that's going to be appreciated more when it's all said and done than he is currently. Kind of like when you're watching movies and you have your classics, right? The Godfather, Goodfellas, Rocky. Belal's like a cult classic, one that doesn't get appreciated until probably when it's all said and done. And when it's all said and done, if he keeps going the way he's going, and you look at the fighters that are still left for him to fight, along with the ones he's already fought, that's going to be one hell of a hit list. And so I think all this is going to catch up, but I think it's still going to be Belal Muhammad's night, and it could be his night going forward for a while. I mean, that he's shown to have a skill set that's really bothering people, and that cardio is something else.
Yeah. Nolan, what's your pick for this one?
Yeah, I'm going to lean with Belal as well.
Okay.
I would even, I think he could get it done within the distance, in those later rounds that we haven't necessarily seen Jack in. So that's what I'm going to lean. I'll say Belal, 4th or 5th round submission.
Yeah, I like that. Rear naked, right? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just got this. I have that sixth sense, that fight sense coming at me. Maybe on Monday I'll be eating crow, but
and just noteworthy over here, I had the same sense that Corey Sandhagen, who hadn't finished anybody in a while, I think his last finish was against maybe Frankie. I thought he was going to win by TKO. I know the TKO ain't exactly the normal TKO.
So that was your fault.
Hey, it was still the result. So, hey, GG, is it unanimous? You got Belal winning this one?
It is, and I think he's going to win via ground and pound. And let me remind people as well.
By the way, due to GG's betting record, that means it's going to be submission. He's going to get the round, though. Make sure
on Saturday night, Goes and I will be hosting a watch along, because I'm seeing in the chat room. I'm not getting the pay-per-view. Come hang with us. We'll tell you what's happening in real time. All right. But on Saturday night, you're going to see a guy named GSP, who was also a decisionator. People used to get mad. Why did I pay $70? Actually, it was $40 back then, or 45. Man, he always does the same thing. But as the legend grew, we had an appreciation. Holy cow, he was actually fucking people up, smashing them, beating them at what they're best at. It took us a while to appreciate what we had. Maybe that's what the course Belal will be on. So decisionators, aren't always the funnest, but we're kind of missing Dominic Cruz a little bit, and GSPs, So let's see what happens, and at least look at it from that lens. Is okay? He's not getting the finishes, but is he smashing? Man, he smashed Leon Edwards. 6 a.m. start or not, he smashed Leon Edwards in his own house.
Yeah. Looks like unanimous decision here for Belal. Yeah, I got this one for Belal. Guys, let's switch over to the co-main event of the card, another title fight. I am surprised by this one, so let me stick with GG because he's a betting man here. Valentina Shevchenko entering as an underdog. Last time I checked, she was like a plus 125, and then I'm seeing in the chat that Fiorot's gonna smash Valentina. Am I crazy? Is this a solid dog pick right here? Are you surprised that Valentina's entering this fight as the underdog?
See that Pelican that just said Belal's going to smash Valentina? He just said it a little while ago that if Colby was in instead of Jack Della Maddalena, he's a star and it would sell. And Colby's like on a 3-fight losing streak. Don't pay no mind to some of these fools. All right. Okay. Valentina, she's a dog, but let me tell you something. I think the Valentina that beat Juliana Pena might have something for her. I think she might win via the grappling against Manon Fiorot. Manon Fiorot moves well, excellent striker, hard to get a hold of, but I'm sure she studied the tape. Erin Blanchfield, where she failed, I think Valentina, obviously, she can hit where Erin Blanchfield can, but she can also grapple. So I like Valentina keeping her title. She's got that experience that Manon Fiorot does not have in title fights.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that not so long ago we were talking about Valentina Shevchenko as like a minus 1,000, minus 800 entering these title fights, and now they're getting a lot closer. Nolan, where do you think Valentina is at in her career? Because clearly we're getting near the end, right? But where do you see her? Do you think she's still prime? Where do you put her sort of as where do you think she's at in her career? Because it's an interesting spot, right?
Yeah, I think she's on a bit of a rebound, but it's like, I think we know where things are headed. I think she's towards the end. I still put her in kind of an elite category, but the gap has closed. I think that we'll see that with this fight. I honestly think this is kind of a tricky fight for her. I am leaning with her, but Manon's so physical, I seeing her, and I know this is totally different, but when she fought Blanchfield, who's like not very physical, like it was just such a big gap. I mean, even at weigh-ins and the way she looked really depleted, Manon, she's just a really strong physical fighter. So it'll be interesting to see Valentina, who uses that to her advantage sometimes, have to deal with those sort of issues. But to answer your question, I think Valentina is still, I would put her a step above the rest of the pack, but it's not what it was. That gap has certainly dwindled a bit.
Yeah. Women's MMA has been sort of down in the last few years. What do you think is the best result here to sort of try to bring back some of that excitement?
I actually think it would be Valentina Shevchenko winning and kind of recapturing what Nolan was talking about. She's slowed down a little bit, but keep in mind, even her slowing down is still better than a lot of fighters in the division. Unless your name is Amanda Nunes or even Alexa Grasso, most of the time Valentina's hand's the one that's being raised. So it's difficult because a lot of people forget what she brought the career even before the UFC, the wear and tear that she's been through. She's been fighting since she was a kid. So I still think she's a star. I think she's a future Hall of Famer. And I think if the UFC can keep her happy and her keep winning, keep making those paychecks and win, lose or draw, I think she still keeps going.
Yeah, I think if she were to sort of find a second wind in her career, we've seen other fighters do it, and I think Valentina is the type to do it. If she's able to get a brutal knockout and maybe 2 knockouts consecutively or a knockout in a submission, man, all of a sudden a fight with Zhang Weili is huge. We'll see what happens with Amanda Nunes' return. If she were to capture the belt, you know, a fight between them, or if Kayla Harrison were to win, maybe a super fight between them two. I don't know. I think Valentina on top being an all-time great and having success and looking dominant, I think it's great for the sport. So we'll see. But at the same time, I don't know if you're out from France. You know, we know that the UFC is investing a lot in that market, so it wouldn't be too bad. Guys, real quick, another fight in that card is Alexa Grasso versus Natalia Silva. Is this a title eliminator?
I think
not all at once, please.
I think it feels that way, right? It could be. I mean, you just never really know what's going on in their heads, but it has that feeling.
Yeah, Silva's on a nice streak herself. Grasso has history with Valentina, and that hasn't been settled. It's technically 1-1-1. Mm-hmm. So there's something there. And remember, every time the UFC goes back to Mexico, that you start to look at what fighters they could have there in big fights. Obviously, Brandon Moreno is maybe cut the line. And now you got Yair Rodriguez as well trying to lobby for a fight there. So we'll see. Whoever's healthy and ready to go, they could, you know, possibly get a title shot. But keep an eye on Jasmine Jasudavicius. She's on a roll. And let's not forget, Blanchfield has dusted herself off and come back with a win. So, yeah, it's in the mix.
And don't forget about Zhang Weili. I think that's the direction that they're going to go in here. So I'm going to say no, because I think it will be a little bit of time before we see Valentina fight somebody else that's not Zhang Weili at 125. I think Dana, who doesn't like to, I know Alan said the thing about the poker face earlier, doesn't like to give away much. I think he pretty much gave that away the last couple of times that he's been asked that's something that they want to do. So I expect the time to be now if Valentina wins. Yeah,
that's going to be interesting. I think if Alexa wins, it's going to be very much like Brandon Moreno. I think she has a huge card to pull in saying, hey, UFC 320, you need title fights. I am from Guadalajara. If you were to make an MMA poster from the faces of Guadalajara, she's it. You know, born there, trains out of there. So yeah, that's going to be a tough one. I think it's a wait and see, right? Because Natalia Silva is definitely a good chance of winning here. I believe she's actually the favorite entering the fight. So yes, certainly interesting, the title picture at 125. Guys, before we wrap things up, and I know we went a little bit over, but give me one highlight, if any, Nolan, because I know you're.
It was mentioned briefly by George, but Jose Aldo. Anytime you get to see him compete, it's fun. I know the matchmaking recently has had us scratching our heads, but it'll be cool, man. I mean, he's fighting in Montreal. I'm sure those people will be jazzed up to see him fight, and let's see what he's got left in the tank.
Goes.
Jasmine Jasudavicius and Jessica Andrade, I think, is going to be a scrappy fight.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
Navajo Sterling. No, I'm just kidding. Listen, what I want is for Benoit Saint-Denis to stay on the card. I know they lost Joel Alvarez, but when you got someone like Mauricio Rufy saying, I want in, make it happen, UFC. The Fighting Nerds, man, that's a squad. They're on fire. Revenge of the Nerds. Somehow you can maybe factor that into fight week, because obviously they just took an L a few weeks ago. But I would love to see him step in and preserve that, because otherwise Nolan and Goes will have this thing down to a 1.5 out of 10.
Yeah, no, for sure. Look, and I think it's time to wrap things up. You see the light there going out on GG. So guys, great show, great insight. I appreciate you guys also being having some mercy on me and my hosting skills. I kind of messed up there at the beginning, but nonetheless, great show, great content. Guys, remember 3 things you must do as an MMA fan. Follow MMA Junkie on all social media. Hit like for this video, and remember, subscribe to the channel. That is a must for any hardcore MMA fan, so make sure you do that. We have Mike Bond on site this weekend, or this week, for UFC 315, so tune into MMAJunkie.com for all your coverage of that pay-per-view, plus tons of other content. So make sure you keep it locked on MMA Junkie. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next Monday.